Welcome to a University of Missouri podcast. This week we are joined by Lucy Fichter, Manager of Information Technology. Lucy's here with us to talk about Social Security remediation. Lucy, welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer.
When we say Social Security remediation, exactly what is it that we're talking about?
We're talking about securing Social Security numbers by removing them from applications and data files.
And so when you say removing them, tell me a little bit about how that process works. You're storing them in a vault, so to speak, and replacing them with alternate IDs, is that correct?
That's correct. We're working with Oracle Consulting, and they are developing a product called the Oracle Data Privacy Shield, ODPS, and part of that environment contains a secure database, which we call the vault. When a Social Security number is checked into the university, we will take it from our administrative applications, check it into the vault, and create an alternate ID. We call it the alt ID, which looks like a Social Security number. We give that back to the calling application, and that's actually the data they store in their application. By doing this, we have only one location where the Social Security numbers are stored.
Because up until now, I'm sure that Social Security numbers have been pervasive in a multitude of applications for a multitude of business reasons. And so I'm sure there's Social Security numbers in places where people wouldn't even suspect.
We haven't even begun to uncover all of them in the departments. They're in all of our PeopleSoft applications, as well as department applications, spreadsheets, access databases, and then we have paper copies of Social Security numbers stored everywhere. But we have solutions on how we can get rid of those, or at least make them more secure.
And all of this is really born out of the idea to help better protect employee privacy, and those we do business with.
Definitely. It's our responsibility to protect the data that we keep on all of our constituents, no matter what relationship they have with the university. And with the increasing identity theft that's happening, we really had to take a look at how we can take extra security measures. We already protect the data that we store, but there was more that we could do. And this is somewhat of an extreme measure by storing Social Security number in one location, but we feel it was the best solution.
Tell us a little bit then about what's been done. What have you tackled so far and what still needs to be done?
Over the past year, our focus has been on PeopleSoft Human Resource and Finance. We have gone through a very extensive inventory and requirements gather with the PeopleSoft technical people as well as the functional users in those areas. We've worked very, very closely with them to examine their use of Social Security number and gather a lot of detail about where it's stored, what their work process is, and paper and archiving of Social Security number. Then we looked at each of those processes and determined a remediation approach. We built a requirements document, which is now up to about 120 pages, and put that back in front of the functional owners of those processes and asked for their approval on our remediation approach. After that, we have entered the build phase. The build phase is actual development of the prototypes that we did in the planning phase in order for us to be able to move into production with those solutions. That's the phase we're currently in. So we have a lot of people involved at this point. Once again, we have the developers heavily involved because they are the ones who will actually modify PeopleSoft pages and route data files to us. One thing that we have to attend to is there are legitimate reasons for Social Security number use. We have federal reporting. We're all familiar with W-2s and 1099s. So we have a process in place to convert that alt ID to the real Social Security number to transmit it out to external agencies. So we're busy with all of that development.
What's the time frame then that we're looking at, and what's next on the horizon after this phase is complete?
The time frame we're looking at for production implementation is within the next 6 months. Right now we're negotiating with HR, finance, functional people, as well as technical people for their resource availability. Everybody's busy, and so we all have to figure out how we can work together. We're hoping by February to be in production. The next phase after PeopleSoft HR Finance is PeopleSoft Student. However, we are working with PeopleSoft Student because they have an upgrade next year. So we are working with them to see how we can fit into their upgrade. We anticipate that they will not be ready until fall of 2010. So we're going to start looking at remediating some of the department applications.
If I'm an employee, Lucy, listening to this podcast and I want to know what I can do to help, what kinds of advice would you give me?
There's a lot of things that you can do now. It's going to be a little while before we can get to the departmental applications. We may do some next year, like I said, but it wouldn't be the bulk of them. So every department can be proactive in their own remediation of SSNs. The first thing to do is look at how you use Social Security number. Where are you storing it in files? Where are you storing it on paper? The next question to ask yourself is, do I really need Social Security number? Do I have a legal reason for using Social Security number? Can EMPL ID be used? Can some other identifier be used? EMPL ID, of course, is the number one best option.
Is that employee ID?
The employee ID.
Okay.
Every student and employee should have one EMPL ID. So it is a unique identifier. Other than that, you need to look at where you're archiving documents. Some people, for example, shred their documents, but they let them sit out in an open area until they get around to shredding them. Well, lock them up. If you have a file cabinet or you have a storage room, lock them up. Restrict access. If you have documents you don't need Social Security number or they are past their retention period, get rid of them. If you have documents that you do need to retain for a period of time, contact records management and have them store them for you with an identified retention period. So there are other ideas how you can begin the remediation process on our website.
And so tell us a little bit about that, where they could go for additional information.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and give you the URL here. It is https://doit.sharepoint.missouri.edu/sysops sysops/public/SSN Project. Now, my email, if you have questions or have difficulty accessing this URL, is ficterl, FICHTERL, @umsystem.edu.
Anything else that you want to talk about or mention that we've forgotten or didn't hit on?
The only other issue is that we know a lot of people accumulate data, and everyone needs to remember the data isn't going to be available from PeopleSoft applications anymore. So if you are able to get information and collect it from that source, it will now be stored in Alt ID. And only authorized people will be allowed to see the actual SSN. So if you have processes in place, consider that. If your source is PeopleSoft, it's not going to be available to you, and this is your time to switch over to using Alt ID or the EMPL ID.
Thank you, Lucy, for taking time with us today doing a University of Missouri podcast. And thank you to our audience for listening. If you have questions for Lucy or suggestions for an upcoming podcast, please visit our podcast webpage, available from the UM System homepage at www.umsystem.edu. And join us next week for another topic and another guest.